Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is on fostering transparency in research, challenges and the best practices for fostering transparency in research. And our speaker was a member on that panel. He is Professor Adebayo Adejumo. He is multidisciplinary with his professorship in health psychology and bioethics. He was a member of the technical committee that developed the Nigerian National Code of Health Research in 2006. I think I saw him on the photo yesterday. And also served as a member of the National Health Research Ethics Committee for Nigeria for 11 years. He is a laureate of the Union of African Population Studies, a recipient of the Fogarty International Scholarship in Ethics. Professor Adejumo is a fellow of the Nigerian Psychological Association and also a fellow of the West African College of Nursing. He is the secretary, Nigerian Developmental Psychologists Association, and the chair of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Ethics Committee, University of Ibadan. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to the platform of EXCEL-RITE Conference, Professor Adebayo Adejumo. Please give him a round of applause. Make it loud, please. Make it generous. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to once again appreciate the organizers for this privilege. I know it's a great honor to be here. I've been educated over the past 3 days, and I'm going home with fresh lessons. I've been called to speak.
Next previous pointer.
Okay. Okay, so I'll be talking about research transparency, and basically the title is Fostering Transparency in Research, Challenges and Best Practices. So along the line, I'm going to talk about transparency in research. What does it mean? I'll present a background. I'll talk about challenges in fostering transparent research in Nigeria, and also I'll highlight a couple of best practices for transparency in research, and of course there will be a conclusion. So in terms of the meaning, what do we mean by transparency in research? Is the practice of conducting and sharing research in an open and accessible manner. Please let's take note of the two keywords there. They are underlined: in an open and accessible. Those are the two keywords that will drive what we are going to say for the next couple of minutes or 1 hour to come. So it involves principles. When we say principles, principles are reasons behind your actions. What premeditates a decision, what informs of a course of action. Most times that's within the context of what we call principles. And of course the essence is to have reproducibility. In other words, when people have access to what you've done and they are familiar with your methods, chances are that they can make a duplicate of what you have done if it was actually scientific. And of course, not only the reproducibility, data and code sharing is also one of the things that we need to consider when we are talking about transparency. When we are saying transparency, we are saying openness, not hidden. People having access. So if you are doing what is right, don't need to cover it up. Of course, when people pick your data, they could even take the knowledge beyond what you found, add to the body of knowledge that you have built, upon which you also can begin to think deeper and also be a point of blessing or advanced research agenda when you look at what others have done with your data. So the goal is to ensure that research findings can be scrutinized, that is, nothing covered. Somebody can bring in the lenses and check it up. You are not afraid. It can be replicated and of course can be built upon by other people. So transparency allows patients, researchers, and policymakers to access information about ongoing studies and their outcomes. But leaning on what we've just learned a couple of minutes back with the principle of community engagement, it's nice for potential participants in research to be carried along right from the conception of the research idea. When they do that, there's something we call buy-in. In other words, they feel part of the decision making and the direction of your research. So right from the beginning, they are already wired into being there. This helps to improve ethical standards and fosters trust in scientific findings. Because if they have been part of the process, the NREC chair mentioned a moment ago, to such an extent that they are involved along the entire rubrics, they could also qualify if they put it up to analysis and contribution in data writing to be part of, the authors. So different disciplines may define research transparency in various ways, but we need to know that it's a key value in open science movement. And of course, it helps to promote integrity and accountability in research. So why are we interested in looking at research transparency? It ensures reproducibility by allowing others to verify and replicate findings, strengthening scientific integrity. It also fosters trust by making data, methods, and results openly accessible, and by so doing, you are reducing bias. It also enhances collaboration, enabling researchers to build on existing work, share insights, and drive innovation across disciplines, efficiently and ethically. There are core principles that we must take to heart as we proceed. One is honesty. If you are honest, you won't be afraid to share what you have done with other people. Okay? And of course, when we are also talking about the principles guiding research transparency, one thing we must never forget again is openness. Nothing is secret. Then, of course, accountability. The meaning of accountability in this context means responsibility, and also it also means answerability. That's the meaning of accountability in this context. That means for anything we are doing, we must own it up, we must be answerable, we must be accountable. So what's the relationship between transparency in research and responsible conduct of research? Transparency in research ensures accountability and openness, which fosters trust. And of course, responsible conduct of research emphasizes the character of the researcher. One could have so much information in the head, but if the character is weak, you still get nowhere within the context of our discussion at this point in time. And of course, I have seen several people almost getting to the zenith of their career, but one little banana peel, they were right down. I have many examples in universities. How readers going into the level of full professorship laid exams, one individual laid exams on someone else's data and translated that to a mind-blowing publication. Unfortunately, no acknowledgement of the source of the data, and of course, it likely stolen data. So while the publication came out, unfortunately, the head of the institution also was a member of the grant that brought that study to that university. Unfortunately, this person who stole someone else's idea to published alone without even putting the name of the original owners of the data and those who got the grant to run that work. So the sponsor called the vice chancellor straight away. What's going on here? The data we are seeing and the description looks like the grant we gave to you in your university. What's going on? Of course, it was not difficult to know the name of the person whose name was on the publication. And that's how 6 years. He was demoted for 6 years. So today, his students are his bosses. So we need to be careful. Responsible, it talks about virtuous character, ethic, and of course there are other principles that are important But in this instance, we are emphasizing virtue. You may be well informed in the area of principalism. You may be well informed in fidelity, fiduciary responsibility, utilitarianism, consequentialism, deontology, Kantianism. Good. But if that has not translated into positive behavioral outcomes in the manner by which you conceive the idea of research, conduct it and get it done and get it published, through the entire cycle, then one will be breaching the tenets of what we are talking about at this time. So transparency is the in thing. Nothing is hidden. So what are the historical landmarks? Where are we coming from? Research has been on for quite a long time. Some of us may not even know that there are publications before Christ, even when it comes to research. Somebody will wonder, what is this man saying in this place? Daniel chapter 1, for example, is a typical clinical trial publication. Daniel chapter 1. It talks about a research problem. It talks about the population. Talks about even selection eligibility criteria in that Daniel chapter 1. Talks about the intervention that was proposed. Talked about the duration of research. Talks about the PI. Talks about the co-PI. A very, very detailed clinical trial, publication. So we've been having studies before now. But it's only in the 17th century that the establishment of peer review process ensuring scientific accountability became an issue. And by the time we got to the 28th century, and that means 1947, 1963, 1967, on and on, Belmont Report of 79, the issue of people needing to see through what you have done in the closet, the extent to which it meets scientific ethical standards became an issue. You're able to remember the Nuremberg trials, 1944, 1945, and the terrible outcome of those medical experimentation and how it became necessary to actually find out what did you do? Of course, those physicians were saying it was their boss that commanded them to do some of those terrible research experiments on the gypsies, on the captive populations. But everything that were covered, the things that were covered became manifest. Because in between the dishing out of the order to go and conduct research and the actual study itself, many things were hidden. And of course, that's the essence of the Nuremberg trials that eventually produced the Nuremberg Code that has 10 major elements. Okay? Of course, you also remember in 1932. In 1932, the Tuskegee syphilis studies. How the government in this instance was not sincere. United States for that matter. It was the frontline researcher, the group that were called together to investigate the long-term impact of Treponema pallidum, the organism that causes syphilis. But they did not disclose that what they were doing is a long-term impact examination of the manner by which syphilis will cause havoc in various organs, and they wanted to have that information. The government was the one who wanted to have that knowledge. So what the other did was they told them that they had bad blood. There are many other issues related to deception. I'm not saying it's wrong to deceive in research. It could be ethical to deceive in research. Sims already told us that as far back as the 1900s and 1996, and with the last version in 2016. A section in Sims mentioned the criteria for which we can deceive. You can deceive populations, really, truly, if there is no other way by which the research questions will be answered, except you deceive. And again, if the design is that which is not going to be harmful to the population and the sample. And lastly, Siom says that no matter what will be your justification under the sun, the ethics committee must look at your deception process and also should be the one to approve the debriefing process. That means apart from deception, there should be a debriefing thereafter. I deceived you along the line, but I need to let you know what I did. That's still part of the domain of transparency. Okay? And of course, funny enough also then, 600 were the sample size, but they deliberately targeted Afro-Americans, 399 of them. Today is not today for talking about historical accounts. The 2000s also saw the rise of open access journals and data sharing policies, increasing accessibility. I can remember the time I was doing my master's, 1996, 1997. Even to the time I started my PhD and writing up in 2000, there was hardly anything called open access that much, even in the two campuses of the university. I mean, UCH campus and the main campus. It's only at the College of Medicine where we had Medline Sarge. That's the best we had that time. But open access journal, being in the confine of your room and clicking and accessing journal wasn't an end thing. So for those who know Kennedy Library University, it's like a dungeon, like we just returned from, a workflow station that's below level. That's where you really have those old-time journals that had gathered dust. That's where we were searching and searching and searching for information. And you could be looking for one journal for 3 days. That's the time some of us wrote our PhD. But by the time I moved to North America in 2000, from my bedroom, I can access any journal on University of Toronto campus, looking at robust library, even in my kitchen. On the football pitch, on the road, free access. So it's a story of two different tales. So technology started driving the manner by which we were doing the research. What were covered up before that others didn't have access to were becoming more and more visible, reproducible, accessible. So there's a video now that we need to quickly watch. So get set for a brief flight, just about 4 minutes of flight. You ascend into the skies and you descend after 4 minutes. Enjoy your flight.
Begin this presentation by defining what transparency means. Practice of conducting and sharing research in an open and accessible manner involves principles.
I need to appreciate Dr. Achidoze for his contribution why this was being put together. This is one of the lessons of this meeting.
The goal is to ensure that research.
That's also part of openness, so that you don't think that you're a genius. So we are talking about how do we address publication bias now. We will need to encourage the publication of even null results. As a student in Canada, I can remember that one of the publications we were made to read is publicizing your negative findings. Some people will go to the field, by the time they return, almost all the hypotheses are turned down, negative, and you feel discouraged. But there we were told that even when you have a negative result, still publish it because you are telling the world, this is the way not to go. Look at other variables. These ones may not be the ones predicting your dependent variable at this point. And just like you remember, there was one of the US presidents who were told also that contested several times, I think the 4th time before eventually becoming the president. Nigeria, you remember also, our big man did it 3 times until he became a president. So that you didn't get it the first time, that doesn't mean that subsequent findings will not launch you out. So did we get that? So, and of course, we need to promote transparency in research as a thing of, spirit, soul, and body that you have to throw into it. And of course, there's something we call pre-registration. At the point at which you're conceiving that study, register with the ethics committee or similar agencies in terms of what you intend to do, how you want to do it, so that by the time the findings come, there's a trajectory that people will follow to know from the time of conceiving the idea to the time of rolling out the findings. Open data practices, that is part of what the barrister talked about yesterday. You don't need to just keep everything covered, okay? If you cover that talent, you shut yourself out of the market. But the more you let your finding get known to the larger world, the likelihood that people will get to associate even you with your publication or your data. So incentivizing journals to prioritize study quality over outcomes is also very, very important. So some journals will be saying, well, this doesn't look as if it's sufficiently catchy. Why don't you tilt it this way? No. Empower journal editors, empower journal outfits to be able to publish results the way they are. And maybe there will be reward systems for establishments and institutions that will enforce that. Apart from this, we need to clearly document procedures when we are talking about the methodology, transparency in methodology of our studies. Because the methodology is the key to that research that you are doing. Even in the method section is like the fulcrum of your academic publication, scientific publication. The method spells out step by step of how you arrived at your data, how you recruited. Remember the constituents of your methodology section. You talked about the design itself. Let people know the approach, the design. Apart from the design, where was it done? Because the factor of the setting also, in one way or the other, relates to the finding you are going to come up with. How did you select your sample from the population? What about sample size calculation? Now you don't hide anything. Make it open. The instruments with which your data was collected, that's very, very critical. Present each of those items in your questionnaire, even if it's a survey study. The psychometric properties. What's the name of the scale? Who authored the scale? When was the scale authored? What are the sample items in the scale? What's the response pattern? What's the technique of administration of the items of that specific scale? Then how do you interpret the norms on the scale? What about validity reports? What about, reliability reports? On and on and on like that. All those things must be included in the manner by which you share information. Because it guides others also to know, especially when it comes to issue of norms in the use of skills in social science and social behavioral research. Use open access repositories for data sharing. That was said already yesterday. Then engage peer review and ethical oversight. There should be a mechanism by which your mentor will also guide you step by step, especially at the beginning stages. Even up till this point, when it comes to certain parts of my research, I even call younger colleagues to make inputs. I have analyzed the data, I used regression. But the editor said I should go beyond regression. That what I should do is sequential equation modeling, SEM. Sequential equation modeling is an improvement over regression. It's not that regression was wrong. But by the time I used sequential equation modeling, I could really see, because it helped me to identify the role of the moderators, the role of the mediators, when we're looking at the influence of the IV over the DV. It became clearer. So engage peer review and ethical oversight. Maintain honesty in reporting results. Don't say, well, by the time I was analyzing, this level of significance was 0.051. And if it is 0.051, ideally you should reject your hypothesis, isn't it? But some people say 0.51. 0.051 and 0.50 or 0.49. Now, and you change what should be rejected. You change it to something that will be upheld. You have misled the scientific world. So there should be trust. Present it as it is. So there are case studies everywhere. In public health research, for example, there was lack of open access to data from some research conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria. And of course, this slowed collaborative efforts and limited the ability of other researchers to verify findings or build upon them. This also happened in the 1990s. I was also in this Abuja. Our people here will remember the Abalaka story and a couple of other stories in the late 90s. It's not that the man didn't do anything, but a couple of things were not sufficiently transparent, if you remember. And he was laying, the claim that he was moving mountains. But if you're moving mountains, let's know the step by step of how you are getting it done. Further researchers in Nigeria often face challenges in pre-registering studies due to limited awareness. Some people don't know honestly. So that means there could be honest mistakes. So we need to, but trainings like this will make us to be, the ones to take the message down to the larger audience. This is the way to do it right. So, what are the ethical and legal barriers to research transparency? Confidentiality concerns could be. Some people could naturally think, if I release this to him, do I know what he's going to do with it? Is he going to keep the data to an extent that information that those who should not know about it will not know about it? There's a slight difference between confidentiality and privacy. Privacy is the extent to which I want you to have information about me or to share myself or data about me with someone else. That's privacy. But confidentiality is a step beyond privacy. We are not only identifying that we need to be mindful of what we shouldn't share, but what are the mechanisms that you are building into your study to ensure that those who shouldn't have access to sensitive information will not have access to it. Of course, coding, anonymization, and those things that were said, that were mentioned yesterday also come under that bracket. What about data protection laws and intellectual property restrictions? Somebody spoke about that also yesterday, so I wouldn't want to rehash or to reinvent the wheel. Researchers must safeguard participants' privacy, complying with regulations like the General Data Protection Regulation. And of course, this is Comprehensive Privacy and Security Law enacted by the European Union, and that was in 2018. It's one of the toughest when it comes to protection of private information. And of course, we need to also respect proprietary rights. Ethical dilemmas may occur in sensitive topics, limiting data sharing. There's one example I also need to share that I've come across at one point in time. Somebody looking at psychosocial response to widowhood. Psychosocial response to widowhood. But one of the questions implanted in the questionnaire is, describe your last sexual experience. Describe your last sexual experience. So ethics committees will need to read in between the lines when you are looking at research instruments. Don't claim that, well, I've looked at, I've scanned through, put meanings into what may likely happen. And of course, that was more than enough to traumatize those who participated in that study without even giving any injection. Merely reading that item in the questionnaire. When those widows got to that point, they start shedding tears. So when we pick up protocols and somebody said, this is a no-risk study, most times I want to throw it away from my table. There is no study that doesn't have risks. But it could be minimal, it could be less than minimal, it could be greater than minimal. It could be psychological, it could be social, it could be legal, it could be economic, it could be physical. And not only being mindful of that, research ethics committee members and we, researchers by extension, should also be very, very well crafted in the area of calculating, knowing about probability and magnitude of risks. That's very, very important. Probability and magnitude. People like Ezekiel Emmanuel, David Wendler, those are the people that publish in those areas. And David Wendler, for example, I don't know whether with this Trump thing is still at the NIH. He writes on those issues. So there could be sensitive topics that may limit your data sharing. Because like the example I cited, if the relatives now got to know when we ask you to describe your last sexual experience, it may not even be your late husband that had the last sex with you. Am I correct? It could be the neighbor. So your extended family that has been helping you to pay school fees and to support you as a widow, where they not get to you that is that guy that's in the room, the room opposite yours, in the face me and face you, that is really helping you. There may be problem. There may be problem. So navigating these challenges requires carefully compliance and ethical oversight. So there's another case study here, and that's in 2018, a pharmaceutical study with critical data on adverse drug effects, leading to widespread use of a medication later linked to severe health issues. Lack of transparency in sharing trial results delayed corrective actions, especially in that instance, and eroded public trust and highlighted the need for stricter regulations to ensure ethical research practices. So specifically, you can click onto the website and read about that case a little more. But the summary of the case is what you find in the red color. Pharmaceutical companies may withdraw critical data such as the case of GlaxoSmithKline failure to report safety data about the drug Avandia, which led to significant legal and ethical scrutiny. There's no point trying to compare between Cafenol and Panadol. It was Cafenol and Fensic in our time, at Baba's time. So there's no point, there's no problem investigating it. But don't come to tell us that Cafenol is superior to Fensic when you have not told us all the truth about Fensic and all the truth about Cafenol. Panadol Extra may be more efficacious, but what was the impact on the liver? When you are publishing, did you include that in the literature so that everybody will know? Making it open, making it bare. So there are also inadequate funding limits. There could be inadequate funding, and this is the bane in Nigeria. The extent to which we find ready sponsors is questionable. But like we refer to Professor Tomori's position, we should begin to look inwards. The $200 million case that he presented, if USAID and the foreign sponsors had not stopped their financial support, where would the $200 million, where will it have gone? So, but if there is a mechanism that we know a specific part of the education budget goes for research, it makes it clearer. Look at the TED fund that we are leveraging on for quite some time. TED fund has been hijacked at the moment. I don't want to be political on this platform. So, of course, there could be bureaucratic red tape and corruption, even when the opportunity is there. To deal with civil servants would be like dealing with Satan on earth. To move files from one table or the other, even look at pensions, for example. Most people die before they're able to access what they labor for, what they struggled for. What that is, they shouldn't be waiting for anyone. But at each point, you have to drop something. And at the end of the day, maybe little or nothing comes out. And it may not even come out at all in many cases. Insufficient training in research ethics. Of course, I can remember one guy that went out there, I don't want to mention which country, and had a 2.5 to 3 months training. And by the time he returned to the department, he changed the label by his door, ethics expert. And I was wondering, I spent 1.5 years learning ethics in Joint Center for Bioethics. I didn't come back to change my door because I still believe I'm learning, I'm still learning, and I will still keep learning. But this guy came and just put a big signboard by the door. Ethics expert has come. So, insufficient training. And some people know little and claim they know so much. So they'll keep making types 1 or type 2 error. And we need to also ask ourselves the extent to which we also are familiar with current literature in our area, especially in the area of ethics also. Of course, weak enforcement, and this is where the laws come into play and the National Committee. So what are the principles of best practices? Fair principles, open access, using technology to enhance transparency, institutional support, transparency and peer review, training researchers on transparency. Role of international organizations also cannot be underplayed. Addressing resistance to transparency, successful implementation examples and challenges and collaboration could also help to check. I went further to try to expand some of those solutions. For fairness, for your work to be transparent, it must be findable. People shouldn't just need to fast and pray before they're able to access what you did. It should be freely available. If it's right, make it open. Make it accessible. Make your work so time is past when you want to guard against what you are doing in your laboratory or what you are rolling out. In fact, one thing I learned from people in Europe and North America is that each time they have a new publication, they put it by the door. I don't know whether some people did it, some people took note of that. When they have a new, they put it by either departmental notice board by their door. That is, even if you didn't know what I was doing, this is what I came up with. And many times you have a copy of that journal published by their door. You can pick one and of course, people will be able to access what you did. And every bit of what we do should be interoperable and should be reusable. That is the data. So this should be integrated into our research workflows. So what are the journals? That open access journals, there are very many. What do you gain from that? It helps us with greater visibility when you use open access journals. And of course, it helps you to increase the accessibility of your research and your publication. And it helps people to also, relate you to a specific area. Oh, that's the guy that's publishing in this area. So it's not difficult to search you and to also identify you. Then, of course, you're likely going to have higher citation rates. So if you keep publishing or you keep doing research and you bury it within your cupboards in your office, you get little or nothing. So it doesn't pay you much. So, of course, there could be faster dissemination of knowledge. Look at the publications that we see in Lancet, Science, and all those things. As the journals are coming out, almost immediately, you find it in almost every part of the world, especially open access journals. And I can specifically remember May 2005. I published something on time to discourage medical inclusion in punitive surgical amputations. Time to discourage medical involvement, surgeons' involvement in punitive surgical amputations. That was in 2005. It was published in BMJ, British Medical Journal. Of course, they told me the night before that the publication would be up the following morning. Because I was in Canada, they published from Europe. So, before we woke in Canada, that publication was already circulating. Under 24 hours, I had 7 international comments arising from my paper. As I was waking up from bed, BMJ, May 2005, Adejumo Adebayo. You can look at that paper. I mean, it sparked a global interest and comments. Because it was a sensitive topic over that time. Because that was the time surgical amputation was raving in Nigeria. And I was at the other end, I was hearing what's going on in this place. From Aga Khan University, Pakistan, and many other places, comments came. So, also the benefits that it could help with public and global benefits and could support knowledge globally. So what are the examples of journals that will come under open access? PLOS ONE, BMC, Nature, you can find PLOS Medicine, on and on and on. You are familiar with that. So, how can we use technology? We can use these techniques, preprints. And this is again what I enjoyed during COVID. There were many preprints that were released, and that helped. But we have to be careful when we're relating to preprints, because preprints could still be subjected to some corrections. So you have to be mindful. So blockchain also could be one thing. Open access repositories and collaborative tools are some of the things you can also deploy. And of course, there's something we call blockchain, open data platforms, artificial intelligence. You could also use that, and the digital annotations tools, I've mentioned some of them here. I'm just trying to, because I could see I'm racing against time. Of course, I've talked about preprints, I've talked about electronic lab notes. When we are talking about open access, do you know your lab note, as simple as it is, could also be an open access document? We send people to the clinical area, we send people for operating room posting, clinical postings. They come with their logbook and their report at the end of each posting. But you know what I do? I see them now, bring your own personal clinic notes. You are in pediatric surgical posting. What did you see? What do you have pediatric surgery posting? You are in surgical oncology. What did you see? You are in neurosurgery and you claim that you have watched ventriculoperitoneal shunt. Tell me the surgical steps by virtue of what you've written. So that makes me know, and all those things must be dated. These are the ways I examine people on, by making things open, by also writing. It also strengthens you to be able to lay claim to what you are writing in your report. Okay, so I may have to still skip this for time, since the slides will be available. So, institutional support to ensure that we have transparency, open access policies. Like University of Ibadan, we have policies for conducting research. And the postgraduate college also has policies that align with the university's research policy. And these things are available in the website. I'm just trying to remember what Dr. Chidozie was saying the other time. While you were late, I was imagining, these things are available. We have them. And of course, every year, that's one thing again we need to thank you for. From the days of Professor Adewale as the VC, it will not just put this online, it will give you hard copies to every lecturer. And the university must have spent so much doing that, making the hard copies available apart from the soft copy. Then disclosure requirements. For any study being done, there should be a policy on that. And we should ensure that all those conditions are upheld. Data governance frameworks, training and awareness. We were doing that in 2006, 2007 with nosedive. But with what I'm seeing in recent times, we need to up that game. Then infrastructural development, bringing, technology to the doorstep of researchers. Making light available, as simple as that could be. I was just going downstairs and I was listening to the manner by which those who took us around were talking about the manner by which they make electricity available on this campus. And I say, wow, will I not need to relocate over here? Because over there, when you are leaving the house, you are going to work, you have one of your prayer points is, Lord, let there be light today. If you don't pray well, there won't be light. Well, here it's given. It's almost natural. Infrastructural development, putting those facilities in place, and advocacy for integrity. These are some of the things we can do. So how does the peers review helps? It validates research quality, identify potential errors. When others read your work, they can help you your likely pitfalls. It also encourages adherence to ethical guidelines and promotes accountability and confirms reproducibility of results. Because somebody can click, I know you're on your feet. I'm mindful. So, researchers, when you are trying to train next, when you get back to your different stations, these are the contents that should, be considered in your next training package when you want to enforce transparency. They are listed there. These are issues that need to be talked about. Okay, and these are websites that you can visit to be able to get a little more beyond what I have said. And of course, organizations have a couple of roles to play. Let me try to see if people may have the information, but they may be resistant. Just like in 2005, 2006, why we brought the Gospel of Ethics to campus. And in fact, some people say, they will soon get tired. They were saying that. In other words, what are they really doing? We have been doing research before. A poor health tool like you, wanting to train professors. And that was it. That was the attitude. But some of them are still living today. And those things we said then are happening now. Up to last week, one was trying to just undoing me to give a retroactive approval. I've done everything, but at the point of now publishing, nice work. And they now said, but in the write-up, we didn't see any evidence of ethical approval. May we see that? And from whichever country it was, he got my line and called me on the radio, not WhatsApp. That you sent in a protocol, urgent, and I should, urgent. And I asked, of course I said, yeah, we don't do that. So we need to be mindful. So these are sites also you can visit and look at their framework and adopt this framework. Okay? And you need to collaborate. Don't work in a silo. We may not be able to look at that video because of time. Okay? So what are the emerging trends? These are things that are beginning to show face. And they will become louder as each days, come. Conclusion. Ensuring transparency in research strengthens credibility, fosters collaboration, and enhances public trust. Overcoming the challenges requires clear guidelines. It has to be in place so that there's no ambiguity. Ethical integrity and accessible data sharing practices. And of course, by embracing best practices, researchers can cultivate a more open, accountable, and impactful scientific community to advance our communities and also to advance the business of research now and for some time to come. Thank you.